Thanks for clicking on Wayne.com for this edition of Inside the Zone. We're talking Week 9, final week of the regular season with Justin Kinney of Optimum Performance Sports. And Justin, it feels like it's been in the blink of an eye to get to this point. That playoffs start next week. The draw came out. Before we dive too deep into Week 9, I just want to get, and we'll do a lot of the playoff preview next week. But I want to get your first impressions, first thoughts when you saw the draw come out on Sunday.
Well, there's some interesting first-round matchups. You look at the higher classes, you feel advantage Northside. Couldn't have gone better for them. And maybe couldn't go any worse for Carroll to start off, having to go to Penn in Week 11. And, of course, with that bye week in there. So, elsewhere, 4A, that one section you could just kind of throw up for grabs. And
I love it, though.
You got Columbia City having to go to Wayne, which would terrify me if I'm Columbia City. I know the focus is on this week, but that is a dangerous, dangerous road trip that you have to take in Week 1. And that's a sectional that I think you could throw any amount of 5 or 6 teams in there that could win it.
You mentioned Columbia City, so that's where we're going to start this week. We've been talking about this matchup for quite some time, hoping it would come to fruition, that they would both be undefeated, I think, in the regular season in terms of conference games, just for the added excitement of it being a true conference championship game. So now you look at Columbia City going to Norwell, both teams undefeated in the Northeast State. It's all on the line this coming Friday. How do you see this one playing out?
Well, I was at Columbia City last Friday, saw them knock off Leo, and it was another impressive performance by Columbia City. They were able to run the ball, and it was a night for James Getz, and it seems like every week they have somebody else that steps up in the backfield. Justice Gorey had a good game as well, but defensively is really where they made their win happen. A couple of times Max Leffler got loose, but by and large were really able to contain the running attack of Leo and limit the passing ability as well from Kyler Decker. And for Columbia City to have a shot in this game against Norwell, they have to take what they did last week and the week before, magnify it by 3. I think that's how big and how good Norwell is I'm still looking at this game as Columbia City being a sizable underdog.
I think when you do look at this game, most people look at the impressive numbers that the offenses have put up. But really defensively, Norwell's #1 in the state regardless of classification. They're giving up 3.5 points a game. And people don't talk a lot about it, but Columbia City's defense is giving up less than 10 a game. They're 13th in the state in terms of points given up overall and 3rd in Class 4A. So really, how do the defenses try to set the tone for this game when a lot of people are just looking at this as like, okay, well, this will be an offensive slugfest. That really could not necessarily be the case on Friday night.
And there was similar MOs in the offense, right? They want to establish the run. And Columbia City really wants to use that multi-headed monster in the backfield to really set the tone, and Norwell does too. They have quarterbacks that can throw it if they need to. Leighton Bailey of Norwell's side, Colton Piper at Columbia City, but it's not either team's real strength. They're very much facilitated by that run game. So for me in this game is who can put the other team in more uncomfortable situations, long down and distances, and make them make plays vertically. I think that's where it happens, but my gosh, it's so difficult to look at Norwell and see a weakness at this point. Not just are they beating teams, like they're just destroying teams. And even if Columbia City is that best threat to them in the NE8, how big is the gap between 1 and 2?
What's your message if you're Josh Gerber, and what's your message if you're Brett Fox? Because if you're Josh Gerber, you really haven't been challenged in quite some time. Meanwhile, we all know about the way that the schedule stacks up for Columbia City, and it gets increasingly more difficult this year as it goes along. But they've answered the bell every time.
They have.
So what's the message? They've been in tight ball games. They've been in games where maybe they weren't even the favorite and come out victorious. So what are the messages from both coaches this week in practice?
Well, if I'm Brett Fox, I'm saying still nobody thinks you can win this game. They were doubting you heading into Week 6 and beyond with this final 4 weeks of the season, and they've continuously doubted you, and here idiot talking heads are saying that you're going to lose as well. So he can use that as fuel. Some other show.
This is
definitely not idiots here.
This is where well put together.
But he can use that as fuel. Still nobody thinks you have a shot in this game. And then Josh Gerber, I think that's a dude that is begging for a game in which his team has to play a complete 4 quarters. He wants his team to win, of course, but he needs that challenge for this team as it primes for the postseason, because they haven't had to put it together a complete 4 quarters in 2 months, really. So he really wants to be able to set the tone for his guys entering the playoffs, because it is a sketchy 3A in the North, and it's going to have to take some complete efforts out of Norwell to advance to state, and they really haven't had to be challenged. So he would love nothing more than Columbia City come in this weekend and really give them a test.
X factor, if there is one in this game, what do you think it is?
I think it's which team can make plays, chunk plays, downfield in particular. It's not neither team's strength, but Leighton Bailey can do it, Colton Piper can do it. Kenny connect with Stratton Fuller downfield several times. It can Leighton Bailey do the same looking downfield? I think it's going to be those plays and also being able to establish the run. You don't want to be 2nd and 12, 3rd and 9 continuously in this game. I think whoever can move the ball, move the chains on the ground, control the football is going to win this one.
Klein Neuenschwander is a name to know for those big offensive passes from Leighton Bailey. It certainly will be an interesting game. It will be our highlight zone game of the week, as I think anybody could expect. When you take a look at the SAC now, Carroll with a definitive win last week, throwing out the entire playbook, Doug Dinan, which I was thinking about this after the game. They did the hook and ladder, the old Philly special. They were running all sorts of stuff, but they did it in the first quarter. Against the other team's starters. It wasn't something that they did, maliciously at the end. And it was genius because those kind of trick plays are something maybe they can use when it's a 7-7 ball game in the postseason and they need a touchdown. Like, I thought that was really great coaching, to be honest with you, in last week's game.
Some people will say, well, why aren't you holding that stuff for the playoffs? But it just gives an opponent another thing to keep an eye on, another thing to prepare for. And also it gives you guys an opportunity to run that in a game situation, right? So I have no problem with him running that stuff. And if we see it again in the playoffs, by all means, it'll be because it was a success in week 8. But, Carroll, after what we saw to Wayne last week with being able to hang 54 on Homestead, and, when you looked at that game without seeing the box score, you said, well, Lamarion Nelson must have went crazy. Well, he had 122 yards, but it was Christian Trimble throwing for 425. So I think that makes it a little bit on the nervous side for Carroll going into this one in terms of having to defend an offense that's not just Lamarion Nelson. But you can say that Carroll defense is much, much better than that Homestead defense.
I don't think we've given enough love to the Wayne receivers.
Right?
Devontae Williams, you're talking about Keyshawn Tolles. Harold Mack seems to be showing up more and more. I mean, really, that's 3 quality receivers. Plus, you've got one of the top running backs in the state. Trimble gets more and more settled into that offense, and they open it up a little bit more as the weeks go in. I wonder. I want to pick Sherwood Haydock's brain because he hasn't really had, unless it was his son, and even then they ran it quite a bit. Hasn't really had an offense where they throw it. Justin Durkis maybe a Woodland a bit as well, but that helps set up the run with Jack Rhodes. And I'm rambling now, talking about the history of Sherwood Haydock, but just the balance in Wayne's only makes Nelson more dangerous when you can't throw everyone in the box to try and stop him.
It does, and that offense scares a lot of people, but the fortunate thing for opponents is that defense can't really stop anybody. And for Wayne, we saw it exactly happen last Friday, is they needed to score every possession to have a shot to win that game because they couldn't stop Homestead. So if you're Carroll, you have some warning signs defensively on what you need to pinpoint, what you need to get ready for. But offensively, Carroll shouldn't have a problem. But if I'm in that sectional with Wayne and Columbia City will get that team first, I'm very, very concerned about having to face the Generals.
You've got Bishop Luers at Snyder this week as well in the SAC. Northrop at Bishop Dwenger. Luers at Snyder, I think, is a good tune-up for both teams. I mean, Luers, this is a great opportunity to play a very solid 5A team before they get in the postseason, start playing 2A teams, which I feel bad for some of those 2A teams because they're really going to try and take it out on them. And then you take a look at Snyder. Here's a quality opponent. They played Dwenger very tough in the Battle of the Bishops a couple of weeks. Seems like they're getting better as the season moves along. How do you see this one playing out? Because it's kind of an important game for both teams. They both want to be victorious and kind of do the things they do because both are looking at this like, hey, we can make a long postseason run if we get things together.
In my opinion, the 2 teams with the best chance of winning a sectional title in the SAC. You look at Snyder, and I know Bishop Dwenger, they have to start off with them. We know what happened last year. You have Northside lurking at the top half of the bracket, but Snyder's already beaten both of them, and they're the number 1 team in the state per the coaches, and they've played like it, both sides of the football. And then Bishop Luers, just because it lays how it lays out, we can say, well, it's not a great Bishop Luers team. It's just one of those years where they get through around 500 in the SAC and then turn it on in the playoffs. It looks like it's going to be a Bishop Luers Eastside Part 4 in the playoffs at some point. So for these 2 teams, I think aspirations are on the postseason with, of course, the victory bell out of reach heading into Week 9. and both teams want to be peaking at the right time. I think if you're Bishop Luers, you're trying to have a good representation on Friday, of course. Yeah, you want to win, but you want to get out of that game healthy. You cannot afford, with the depth issues that they have.
Especially on the line for them.
Yeah, absolutely. The depth issues up front, you got to get out of that game as healthy as can be because it's a very winnable sectional.
When you take a look at the NECC, Angola clinched the big division title last week with a competitive ball game at Garrett, which was nice to see if you're a Railroaders fan. While Eastside, with a blowout win, clinched the NECC small division. Those two will square off at Angola. And I know you say big division is favored, small division could never be favored, right? Like, how do you see this one playing out? Because, Angola has fared well against the top teams.
Yeah.
I was a little surprised at how close the game was to Garrett, whereas Eastside has really not been challenged when it comes to the conference.
You got the two division winners playing each other in week 9. I mean, you could say it's a de facto conference championship game with the division winners playing in week 9. So I like the direction of both teams. We've seen Eastside, that three-headed monster rushing the ball, has just been absolutely great throughout the season. The defense has turned it on when they need to. In Angola, just a great bounce-back year for them, sitting 6-2. After a couple years of us going, what's wrong up in Angola, they kind of come back and have had a good year. Tyler Call has been really good offensively, both running and passing the football. The defense has been stout. And both teams, I feel you look at the draw and say they could make some noise. You look at Eastside, the favorite at the bottom of their sectional, and you have Angola that will entertain East Noble to kick off the playoffs. And that's an East Noble team, really young. And if you're going to clip them, this would be the year to do it in the postseason. So both of these teams, we talk about momentum with Snyder and Luers. This is a momentum game for both of these teams, and get that Phantom Conference Championship trophy as well.
You mentioned momentum going into the postseason. Adams Central definitely wants to have that. They're at Woodland this coming week. Woodland has played well. They'd run 3 of their last 4. But Adams Central has to be thinking ahead to the postseason to a certain degree.
Right.
You can't overlook an opponent, and Woodland has certainly shown that in the past. But if you're Adams Central, what do you need to show this week? What do you need to get done this week? Because ultimately, their goal is to be back at Lucas Oil Stadium playing for a state championship. So you'd think they've got week 9, and then they hope they've got 5 more games, 6 more games after that.
Similar to Josh Gerber, I think Michael Mosier's looking at it and be like, can I please get 4 quarters of football for these guys, because their dominance has been so immense over the course of the season. Only challenged a couple times. You had the Eastside game, and it was a Monroe Central they played too. It was kind of close, but overall, it's just been dominance for Adams Central, and they're going to have to turn it on. Is it going to have to be against North Judson or Flora? Definitely if they play Lutheran in the state finals again. You just want to have your guys have to elevate and play a complete 48 minutes of football, because if you go a couple months without doing it and then all of a sudden you have to do it, it can be difficult.
Final question, what are you most looking forward to this week? As we've mentioned many times, end of the regular season. Hard to believe it's here, but it is week 9, so what are you looking to see from some of these teams as we wrap things up in the regular season?
Well, we rarely get that week 9 winner-take-all-ish type game, and we have that in the NE8, of course, with Norwell and Columbia City. Could be some tiebreaker stuff, of course, if Columbia City wins, but overall, I think it's a winner-take-all type thing in that game. And then in the NECC, kind of a division champion taking each other on. So it's all about hitting momentum at the right time. Every coach wants to do it. You want to finish with a win in week 9, but at the very least, you want to come out of it healthy and with some momentum.
All right. He's Justin Kinney. I'm Glenn Marini, and we'll break it all down for you playoff style next Monday right here on Inside the Zone.